Hello, I'm Greg Scott from Greenfields Business Advisory, and welcome to Module 2 of the Occupational Health and Safety training video for the NCP. Before we get started, just a disclaimer, just to mention that this is not legal advice, it's really an overview of occupational health and safety. In the first module, we learned that Australia is governed by a strong regulatory framework of acts, regulations and authorities responsible for enforcing workplace safety. We also learned that if the entity doesn't comply with its obligations, penalties and possible jail terms may apply. We learned that safe systems of work form a framework for an organisation to meet its obligations, and that action in line with safe systems of work is required. Okay, so let's get started on Module 2 and we'll talk about a safety framework. The safety framework, what's involved? Well, in Course 1, we discussed a safety framework from which to govern an organisation in relation to occupational health and safety compliance. The diagram at the right illustrates what such a framework may contain. We may have governance documents, which may include safety policies, it may include smoking policies, it may include policies such as fatigue management, etc. Standards and procedures may include safety plans or safety manuals, and we'll need a range of operational documents, and that'll outline such as responsible persons, need to factor in to make sure the organisation has work cover insurance, how we're going to monitor and view our performance in managing workplace safety, a range of registers for recording things such as incidents, improvements, etc. We'll need to develop some manuals for training, need to do some toolbox talks. We need to consult, so we'll need to work out how we're going to form a committee and work with our staff to make sure they're involved. We need to take some action to build and implement a safety framework for the organisation. Now, there's a lot involved in developing a framework, so let's just have a look at some of the things that may be included. A safety policy, which details the approach an organisation will apply to OHS manager. A safety plan, which is a document outlining all of the aspects involved with OHS management. Hazard identification is a review of all known hazards associated with the business operations. Module 3 goes into more detail about what's involved with identifying hazards. We'll need to develop some registers. They may be of various hazards, of incidents that might have occurred, the improvements we're going to be taking. Material safety data sheets, for example. We may also need a register for plant and equipment of what those assets are and if maintenance is conducted on those. In terms of training, we'll need to arrange some training materials, training matrices to understand who needs to be trained in certain areas. We'll need to have some records of that training. We'll need to perform some inductions and take some records of those inductions and work out how we're going to disseminate the information to employees. Under the Act, we need to consult. So we'll need to arrange a safety committee, conduct some meetings with minutes recorded of those meetings. That committee will define an agreed approach to managing safety, may also be involved in hazard identification. We'll need to identify, train and appoint responsible persons for occupational health and safety. We need to work out how we manage document control so that the latest forms are being used around the organisation. We need to develop some instructional material, which may be a form of safe work method statements, SWMS, job safety analysis, standard operating procedures, for example. We need to make sure that we're prepared for emergencies. Have an emergency plan, but also evacuation plans at each office or location, and need to do trial evacuation plans from time to time. For plant and equipment, we'll need to have checklists, forms, records of maintenance, and we'll need to work out how we're going to do reporting. So how will people report incidents? How are we going to review the statistics involved with those incidences? We need to monitor and make sure that people are reporting and what's happening in the organisation. If an incident is serious enough, we may need to notify various authorities. We need to track statistics and see how we're going with lost time injuries, medically treated injuries, etc. And for return to work. Under the Act, we also need to make sure we've got procedures and methodologies to manage injured workers back to work. While this list is not extensive, it gives you a good idea of the type of things we need to put together. So if we have all those documents, we need to make sure we also take some action. So an organisation would need to do the following at least. Appoint a person responsible for occupational health and safety. That may be in the form of a manager or supervisor. Write and develop those safety plans and policies. Appoint a safety committee and consult with them. Agree on meetings, whether they're monthly or quarterly, and make sure those meetings are minuted. Compile work instructions, SWIMs, JSAs, standard operating procedures, etc. Need to build some registers to record the incidents that take place, what improvements are going to take place, are going to be put into action from incidents, and also register training that's taken place in the organisation. We'll need to conduct some training, toolbox talks, training sessions, formal and informal. Make sure you have some records for who's attended those training. Record. If it's not recorded, it didn't happen in the eyes of the law. And we also need to conduct some audits. They could be in the form of safety observations from time to time, internal audits, and also you may need to get some external audits to come in and check to make sure that your procedures are being followed. And also review and monitor. From a management point of view, you need to look at statistics. Are the improvements that have been identified being actioned? Management meetings, are they taking place and are they being minuted? So there's quite a lot involved. So here's what we learned in Module 2. A company needs a framework on which to build capability to effectively manage occupational health and safety. We identified many of the components that make up a safety framework. We need to develop a framework so that the organisation can meet its obligations. And train staff and record training, actions, observations, incidents, improvements, meetings, etc. So that concludes Module 2. Join me for Module 3, where we'll discuss a little bit more about how to identify hazards. Thank you.